myself some tea. We have a spill in the tea, and we have an inspired one today, guys. I am. I don't know. Whoops! I'm just about to lose my phone. I would say that. Look, Dora wants to believe in love and travel love and all that kind of stuff. Like my mum and dad, that's how they met, right? Traveling. My dad was traveling in Indonesia. He was backpacking, and he met my mum. So, of course, I want to believe in, love at first sight and travel love and all that kind of stuff. Because, who doesn't want to believe in that kind of stuff? Oops, that's the wrong one. But I guess I'm a little bit jaded now, and I'm going to tell you a story about why I'm a bit jaded about love and travel. And I shouldn't be like that because, everything's an experience, right? Even if you fell in love and you were heartbroken, kind of thing. So let me just fill up the rest of my tea. Guys, something really bad happened this morning. I know it's not really that bad in the scale of life. You see how I'm using a different thermos? Guess what I did this morning? My beautiful thermos. Whoops, I don't know why that's doing that. Oh. I don't know, is something happening with my volume? Can someone just say I'm good? The volume's good? Hold on a second. Okay, let me just put you down there then. Let's go with that. You know what I did this morning, guys? I've been showing off my beautiful tartan old style. It's old. It's an old thermos. And guess what? I fucking dropped it. I had one. This is my second one. I had one. I loved it. It keeps things cold for like nearly 24 hours, right? And it's an old style glass one. I broke that one. Anyway, guess what you did this morning? Oh, I dropped it and I broke it. I'm so pissed off with myself. But you know what? That's first world problems. So, I was just on a live stream. I went for my normal walk. Let me drive, actually, guys. Let me drive. First of all, let's have some tea because this is a spill in the tea. All right, let's drive. I'm driving home, and I have a story. Oops. I have a good story to tell you guys. So, let me just drive out this car park without hitting anyone. Of course, I'm not really going to concentrate on the chat, guys, just to be clear. And I can't really see it. I'm driving. So, anyway, I was on a live stream walking around the lake that I seem to be walking around. This is my third week. Getting some extra exercise. Can't hurt, right? And I was talking to Nicholas, my friend Nicholas Grollo from Victoria, and he was telling me that his mum and dad met on a plane. So his mum was 19 years old, coming from London to Australia, and on the plane she went to the bar. And his dad, well, she met a gentleman at the bar, and they fell in love. They had a drink together and they fell in love. 6 weeks later, they got married. Now, it's interesting because I think back in the day, they were married for 33 years. Unfortunately, Nicholas's mum has passed away. She passed away last year, and so bless her. And his dad and his mum and dad were not together in the end. But they broke up. But they were together for 33 years. So, but I guess back in the day, the old planes, they used to have a bar. I mean, they still have a bar, but it's a first class bar, right? Or first class or business class bar up the top, right? The big Boeing, the big, I don't know, Boeing 47s. I don't know. I have no idea. Nicholas is there in the chat. Say hello, Nicholas. Hello, Nicholas. But I can't read the chat, guys. Can't read the chat. But I'm just telling the story how Nicholas' mum and dad met on a plane. And I just kind of thought, how inspiring is that? I mean, like, the young Dora, if she heard that story, she'd been like, wow, I believe in, like, when you travel, you can meet the love of your life, right? And my mum and dad, they met. My dad was backpacking in Indonesia, and he met my mum. And, they got married. They didn't, I wouldn't say it was, you know, um, well, I mean, they were kind of separated in the end. My mum and dad separated probably in the last, I don't know how long they were separated, to be honest, I have no idea. But they still had a really good love for each other, right? My mum would probably say that my dad was the love of her life. I think my mum today went to my dad's grave and put some his plot and put some flowers on his plot. So my mum extremely misses my dad a lot. But so the Dora in me, right, when I was traveling, always hoped that she would fall in love on a trip. So this is a really appropriate spill in the tea, guys. So it's probably setting me up also for the fact that I'm a bit of a gullible, hopeless, romantic, because I wanted to believe that I could find love overseas and it would work, because even though my mum and dad didn't in the end have, they weren't together in the end, um, but my mum was there for him when my dad passed away. She was there a lot in the end. My dad passed away when he was unwell. So that's love, right? But it's just a different kind of love. And then you think of, like, that love that you never leave each other kind of thing. I don't know if I believe in that. But anyway, my story goes that Dora has been traveling for, however long she's been traveling. I'm 51. I probably started, well, I went to traveling when I first started traveling with my mum and dad. When I was younger, I went to Indonesia as a 3-year-old, I think. And I went back quite a few times when I was younger. And, when I was old enough to travel, the first place I went to was New Zealand, actually. And then I went to Europe. And on that trip to Europe, I'd just broken up with a boyfriend. I was 24. And I was kind of like, in my perfect little mind thinking, I'd love to meet, the love of my life. I wasn't like going out to bars or anything, hoping to find one. I was just doing my thing. I was awkwardly shy too back then too. But anyway, travel actually helps you kind of come out of yourself, right? By traveling, especially by yourself, you actually have to rely on yourself a lot, and you have to ask questions. You have to ask for help, and it's a really good way. I'm not. I have no shame. I know you can see me. You've seen me dance, right? I've no fucking shame. I don't care. Um, but like that's really been taught because I travel by myself. When you travel by yourself, you have to have no shame. Go to a restaurant by yourself and eat. Go to the movies, wherever. I don't care. I don't care what people think of me. I really don't care. But like I wasn't going specifically to Europe to find the love of my life. But in my back of my head, it was always in the back of my head, and um, I'm sidetracked because the car next to me is a black Forester, exactly like. Oh no, it's not. No, just ignore that. Ignore that. Anyway, so and then I came back from my trip to Europe, and I, fell in love again with, a local guy, and that's the boyfriend I was with for nearly 10 years, right? And that ended in disaster, absolute disaster. I should have probably stayed, like, probably left him 5 years before that. But anyway, so I was very jaded in love. I hated men, as you do when you break up with a guy. You're like, oh, I hate men. I'm never gonna have a boyfriend again. I was gonna be a lesbian. No, I was joking. I would never have been a lesbian. Okay, I'm lying to that. But I was like, oh, I hate men kind of thing. I was in my hate men era, right? And I ended up in Mexico. I'm not going to get into how I ended up in Mexico. It doesn't really matter at this stage, right? But I had a bad breakup, okay, and I fled to Mexico. And by this stage, I'm 38 years old. I have no mortgage because he bought the house off me. We had to we settled the house and we separated, and we had to just divvy up the assets. So I might as well, I wasn't married, but it might as well have been a divorce. So I had no debt, literally no debt. I had a car. I was in a share accommodation house. I had all my things in a share accommodation house plus a car. I had no debt. Had a little bit of money in the bank. Happy days, right? So I take myself off to Mexico, and I end up selling timeshare with friends that I'd known previous to when I was living in Mexico previously, and I had a whole lot of new friends there too. I was in this idyllic place called Playa de Carmen. Sorry, not Playa de Carmen, near Playa de Carmen. It's called Puerto Venturas, and it's kind of like an expat kind of area, a gated community. You wouldn't really call it Mexico, I'm gonna be honest. You wouldn't call it Mexico. Mm, I just spilt tea literally down my top. Frig. I didn't actually. Anyway, doesn't matter. That's why I call this segment "Spilling the Tea" because it's literally me spilling tea over myself while I tell you a travel story. Anyway, so I'm in this idyllic kind of little, kind of fake Mexico, right? And I'm selling timeshare, and I'm living my best life, right? And I guess I'm single for like, it's my first time I've been single in like 10 years, right? And I'm Australian, right? I'm living my best life. I look pretty good. There was a lot of stress in that year, so I'd lost a bit of weight, which is not a bad thing, right? So I was looking pretty good. I was on the beach all the time, walking. I was going to gym. I was living my best life. I looked pretty good, right? And I started kind of thinking, well, the guys are kind of like, checking me out. I'm kind of checking them out. I'm like, I'm young, dumb, and why not? I'm not going to get, I'm not here to get married, but like, let's have a bit of fun. You're in Mexico, Dora. You've just broken up out of a big, relationship. Well, go have a fling or something. Enjoy the life, right? So, and that's in my head, right? I'm not thinking about finding the love of my life, but at the same time, I'm still in the back of my head. It's always been like, would I find the love of my life traveling? You know, I've always known that I would never live in another country. If I found the love of my life, I would definitely be taking them back to Australia. I've always had that in my head, right? Australia's a lucky country. I love Australia. And of course, my dad was in Australia and my mum, right? My dad was getting elderly. Um, I loved my dad. I loved my mum too, obviously, but my dad, he was getting older and, I really wanted to be around, right? So anyway, I had a fling with a guy from, oh my God, Lebanon. Oh my God, yeah, can't even believe it. But this is not the story, guys. I had a fling with a guy from Lebanon. That's a story in itself, right? But that's not the story I want to tell you about. Um, I'm just going to add in here that no, I'll go back. I'll circle back. There's a thing called dating passport. Okay, let's just go with that. Okay, and I'll maybe talk about it later on. No, maybe I won't. So anyway, it was a very casual fling with this guy from Lebanon. It was definitely going to be nothing but a fling, and he's a guy I worked with actually. So this is the other thing. It was a little bit naughty, right? Like you're not supposed to have flings with the people you work with, right? So that kind of made it more exciting, right? But anyway, that didn't go anywhere. I wasn't that interested really, to be honest. Anyway, I had moved to another timeshare resort. The timeshare resort that I originally was working at, that was actually where I lived and where I worked in the same area, Puerto Venturas, it closed down. Don't ask me, there was some politics. So I went to work at another timeshare resort that my friend owned. And it was like probably about half an hour away. So I actually had to leave my little gated community, catch a bus down to, not a bus, like they call it like a minivan kind of thing, down to kind of towards Tulum. Um, anyway, this resort's a pretty big resort. Lots of different people, lots of Europeans that work there. Not only, I was the only Australian person, but a lot of Mexicans. Yeah, it was quite international, right? So I love talking to people from different countries. And, when you're selling timeshare or when you're working with people, you get to, hi in the chat, I'm not sure who that is, but I think it's Matt. Is it Matt? I think it's Matt. Um, when you're working with people, you get to, spend a bit of time with them, get to know them. So that's lovely, especially when you're a traveler, right? And so this is a working holiday, right? It is a working holiday. So anyway, I'm working away, and maybe about a week after I was working there, this tall, handsome looking guy. You know, I realized this tall, handsome guy in my, in my where I worked, and I'm like, he's all right looking, right? And anyway, we get talking. Hello, how you going? You know, where are you from? And I thought he was like he just I don't know where I thought he was from. He was very handsome looking. I was just like, wow, you're very good looking. Um, and he was like, who are you? Like, what, who are you? And I'm like, oh, well, I'm Buniara, right? I'm from Australia. He's like, oh, wow, your accent's weird. I'm like, where are you from? He goes, oh, I'm Mexican. I'm like, oh, cool. He kind of looked, I don't know, he looked European to me more than Spanish, Mexican. But anyway, I mean, who am I to know? I don't know. So anyway, um, obviously, I'm on heat, guys. Just, I'm going to be honest. Like, as I said, I'm young, single, and ready to mingle, so to speak. Um, and I thought, man, he's gorgeous. Well, he's tall. And I'm pretty tall, and I was like, oh man, he's cute. But anyway, so we've become good friends at work, right? A bit of banter, back and forth, and that's all it was. It was just a bit of banter, a bit of flirting. Because again, you can't date the people you work with, right? You just don't do that, right? But Dora's on holidays, right? So she doesn't give a shit about anything, right? Um, but that's bad of Dora to say that. But anyway, I'm just on a whole. I guess I was just, having a bit of fun, right? Anyway, Valentine's Day is coming up. Actually, no, it wasn't coming up. That was in 3 months' time. This was about November time. This is 2013 to be precise. 2013. And anyway, this Mexican guy was actually going to he actually got a promotion in the work that we do to go work in the Dominican Republic. So this made it more appealing because I'm like, okay, this guy's actually leaving, right? I don't particularly want to fall in love with a Mexican guy because I've heard a lot of bad stories about Mexican guys. Okay, lots of bad ones. I'm gonna be honest. Okay, all my friends have said, don't date a Mexican guy. Don't go anywhere near them. They are all bad news. So anyway, there's this guy, tall, dark, handsome. He's about to go to Dominican Republic. Dora's on heat probably, and thinks, well, what the fuck? You're only young once, right? And thinks, well, you know what? This is probably healthy because he's going, and that means I'm left in Mexico and I'll go home to Australia and it's fine, right? I'm not going to fall in love. It's fine, I'm fine. It wasn't fine, of course. I fell in love, didn't I? And it worked out that this guy decided also not to go to the Dominican Republic and decided to kind of see, what would happen between us two. So I'm like, God damn it, my plan didn't work. I was kind of, evilly thinking in the back of my head, thinking, well, this is probably not a bad thing. Like, I actually, we get on really well. This is maybe the relationship that, I always thought I'd have, right? Meet a foreigner, fall in love, and go back to Australia. Spoiler alert, we're obviously not together, guys, okay? Diego is not Mexican, right? So, yeah, basically I ended up staying in Mexico for about 7 months. I think maybe it was 6 months, maybe 6 months. I think like my visa only could stay there for 6 months, maybe 6 months, yeah. And I decided to, by this stage, I was fully in love, absolutely crazy, la in love. And I went back to Australia because my share accommodation house that I had organised before I left home, where all my stuff was getting sold. So I had to go back home anyway, because otherwise I could have just went over the border and come back to Mexico. But I decided to go home, sort the house out that I had, like, share accommodation, and then move all my things back to my dad's house, actually. So I spent about 4 months back in Australia sorting that out, and I got another job in the meantime to earn a bit more money, right? Of course, then we're doing the long distance relationship. So long distance relationships are interesting, right? Because it kind of, distance makes your heart fonder, right? So I think maybe this relationship dragged out longer than it probably should have because that I went back to Australia. But I went back. I went back for love. Yes, Dora went back for love. She took a gamble. She thought, fuck it. You live once. I did really like him. I was in love, but it wasn't easy. And I realized that when I came back to Mexico, you know, things didn't really change. The things that we would fight about were always going to be there. There was he's very macho. That's a very Mexican thing, macho. And I am anti-macho in the biggest way, um, and yeah, there were many clashes of culture, and it was an experience, right? But at the same time, I had such a great experience. Like I went at Christmas time to Mexico City to meet his family, his mum, and I had a traditional Mexican Christmas, which was amazing. I've talked about that, I think, on one of my other Spilling the Teas, where basically at midnight you have a big feast. It's crazy. So the 25th in Mexico is just like a day of just you're in a food coma, literally. So anyway, that was a great experience, right? I got to go to Mexico City. I've been to Mexico City before, but I got to go with a boyfriend and see it from a different angle. I went to like more local places too because I had the boyfriend with me. So he was he from Mexico City? I don't know. No, he's not from Mexico City, but he lived in Mexico City at a stage. So anyway, so I got to see some really cool stuff. And when I went back to live in Mexico the second time, I was living downtown, where in downtown Playa del Carmen actually. So Playa del Carmen is very, very a very beautiful beachy resort area. It's quite famous now. Cancun's quite famous too, but Playa del Carmen seems to be really famous now, and Tulum obviously. But if you go back from the highway, east, west, I guess west, I don't know, away from the highway, away from the beach is downtown. And basically that's where all the locals live, right? So it's cheaper. And I got to live like a local. And it was amazing. Like I got to go to the markets and like bargain in Espanol. Like I hardly remember any Espanol now, I'm gonna be honest. It's been 13 years or something, I've no idea. But I hardly have any Spanish. It's 2026 now, and it was 2013 I went. Crap! Wow. So anyway, um, yeah, I got to really experience Mexico, and as a tourist, right, as a traveler, getting to experience you know life in Mexico with a like that way is really, really eye opening. It's amazing. Like I couldn't have paid for that experience. Like I couldn't pay for a trip to Mexico and get that experience, right? I could never get that. But I could only get that because I actually immersed myself with actually getting a Mexican boyfriend. Um, so yeah, I mean, it wasn't wonderful. We fought a lot. Um, but in Dora's mind, she thought, you know what? A lot of the problems are because Mexico is so hard. Living in Mexico is really hard, and I could never see myself living in Mexico. Never ever living there full time. I plan to go back there again to live for another 6 months. In my perfect world, if you ask me what's your perfect world, Dora, I would say I'd live in Mexico for 6 months, and then the other 6 months go back to Australia, do a bit of traveling. Um, yeah, I'd love to live in Mexico for 6 months. I'd love to spend more time with my friends there. I love Mexico. It's not about the men, definitely not about the men. Um, and I'd love Diego to come with me. I'd love him to see what Mexico's about. Mexico's beautiful, especially the Caribbean side. I haven't done a huge lot of traveling in Mexico yet, and that's another thing. If I went to live in Mexico for 6 months out of the year, I would do a bit of traveling. Um, so that is my wish. You got to put your goals out there to the world, right? Let the universe know. That is my goal. And yeah, but I kind of thought in my head, right? Like, a lot of our problems in our relationship is because it's so hard in Mexico. It's so fucking hard. Like, I couldn't speak the language very well too, so I couldn't get a good job at all. So I was working in timeshare, which is, commission only jobs, and that was hard. And, there was a stage there that, like I even had thoughts that it blocked out. I'll wait a couple of seconds for it to come back and then I'll tell the rest of the story. Hopefully it comes back. But anyway, so the rest of the story is that, I was, really was. And part of me, did think I wanted to get married and have a child and, do the normal thing because I had found someone that I really, really, I thought I loved. But yeah, as I said, when I came back to Mexico the second time, I kind of realized that there were some cracks, right? It wasn't wonderful. And was this a holiday romance? Really, was that all it was? I mean, I still loved him and stuff, but I just thought, I don't know if this is really a holiday romance or if this is just a fling or if this is real. Or if a lot of the issues that we're fighting is because we live in Mexico and there's a lot of stress. So anyway, long short, I thought it's a gamble, but how about I help the Mexican boyfriend come to Australia? Because that way, at least I can see if it's really Mexico or if it's just really us. So long story short, he was able to get a student visa and stay in Australia. He was able to work 20 hours a week. On school holidays, he was able to work more, and he had to study something. So he ended up studying, I don't know, I can't remember what he studied. But anyway, long story short, spoiler alert, we realised when we got back to Australia that, the cracks were still there. We were two very different people. And he was a little bit he was very moody. And I don't do moody people. Like, just get the fuck up, just get up, don't sleep all day. Like, just get the fuck up and get on with your life, right? He's very moody. And it didn't work, right? So we ended up breaking up. And we still, we still were friends. Didn't hate him. It wasn't like my previous relationship where I absolutely hated him. And hate's a strong word. I'm not going to say I hate him anymore. But, we just went, we're different people. There's a healthy bit of respect there because we spent a lot of time together and we did a bit of traveling together. And like I said, I thank him for the experiences, right? Because I would never have had that experience in Mexico. And I don't think I would have had that deeper love for Mexico. And he was really good at food. He was good at cooking and he loved food. So I love food, right? So we really spent a lot of time eating and drinking alcohol and just enjoying the culture of Mexico. And I thank him for that and I'll always thank him for that because without him in that relationship, I would never have had that love for Mexico as much as I've had. And so that brings me to a funny story. He's now married, right? He's married. He's been with his girlfriend, wife. I don't know. I reckon probably, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years or something like that, right? So he's now a permanent resident of Australia. And I hear from him periodically. Sometimes, he had a relationship with my mum and dad. He actually lived with my mum for a little while because something happened and he had nowhere to live, so he stayed with my mum for a while. So my mum really likes him, thinks he's a bit like the son. My dad liked him. When my father passed away, he came to the funeral. So there's a bit of respect there, right? And so anyway, we haven't caught up for a long time. We maybe catch up every 6 months on the phone. That's about it. And I'm, happy that he's now Australian, right? And he's got a good job. He's happy. I get a random text yesterday saying, "Hey, are you around?" I'm like, "What do you mean I'm around?" He goes, "Can you talk?" And I'm like, "Not now, but I can talk later on." I'm like, "Why? What's wrong?" And I just had this vibe, and I'm like, "Oh God, what's wrong?" Anyway, I get hold of him later on in the afternoon. He calls me. And he goes, "Oh, I need a favour." And I'm like, "What's that?" He goes, "Oh, I've broken up with a wife." I'm like, "Oh, for God's sake, seriously? Like, seriously?" I'm like, "Can't you?" I said, "You just got married like 2 years ago. can't you fix it up? Like, I mean, you're very, I said, you're very reactive. I said, you got to remember that I know you very well, right? I know exactly the things that you do in your relationship. You're probably still doing in, well, that you did in our relationship. You're probably still doing in their relationship. He goes, no, 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 it's definitely over this time. I'm like, he goes, there's been many fights. I'm like, I'm sure there's been many fights, right? So I'm having deja vu going, oh my God, nightmare, nightmare. He's like, can I come and camp in your backyard? I'm like, what? He goes, I don't want to stay up here any longer. I want to come back to Brisbane. So he's living in another area in Australia. And I'm like, look, it's not ideal. I said, we're Diego's renovating the house. I said, there's not much room anymore because it's all taken up with the renovation stuff, the chickens and this. And he's like, no, 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 I just need a little bit of space. Like, it won't take long and, I'll get a job and I'll find somewhere to live. I'm like, do you know how hard it is to find somewhere to live down here? I said, you're better off staying up there. I said, look, I'll talk to Diego, but I think you guys need to talk to each other. I said, gotta remember, I used to date you. I know exactly what you're like. You're a moody bastard. And I said, you're very reactive. You had a fight, and now you're like talking to your ex-girlfriend, saying that, I'm going to move down to, to Brisbane. I said, that's not realistic. I said, this is what you're like. And he goes, I said, talk to your wife, work it out. I said, you're not perfect. She's not perfect. Work it out. Anyway, long story short, I came home and told Diego last night. And he's just like laughed. He's like, what? I said, yeah, I know. I said, it's not great, is it? And he goes, anyway, in my head, I've got a little bit of like, karma's a big thing, right, for me. Like, I never want anyone homeless, right? He's not homeless. He can still live with his wife up there for a bit till he figures out what he's doing. But he's just got, randomly wants to change and like go somewhere else. That's, very much him. Like, we've had a fight, let's go. He used to do that to me even. So anyway, I said to Diego, I said, look, we had good karma because we stayed in someone's backyard for 4 months. We stayed in someone's backyard for 4 months and they let us stay there, right? I said, for me to say no to someone, I'd have to have good reason. And I said, how do you feel about it to Diego? He's my ex-boyfriend, right? It is weird, right? But he's like, it's not great. He goes, and like, he wouldn't be using our house. He'd be literally, he's got a swag, he's got a shower toilet thing set up. He's got a barbecue. He's used to camping, right? So he's self-sufficient in that respect. He's got a car and stuff. And I said to Diego, I said, look, I feel like I can't say no because I feel like, someone helped us. Like, it would have cost us an absolute fortune, guys, if we had paid for, a caravan park for 4 months. Absolute fortune, right? So anyway, I kind of said to him, I said, look, I'll talk to him. I'll give me a call tomorrow afternoon. And I said to him also, just to FYI, I am going away in under a month and a half. So I don't think it's really convenient, like really appropriate that, you're still there when I'm not there. I don't think Diego's going to really want that. He's like, yeah, no, it won't take me long. I'm like, whatever. I said, but it was to tell you, there's a lot of homeless people because they can't find anywhere to live, even if they've got a job. And I said, you're better off, staying up there and keeping your job and finding somewhere to stay up there. But anyway, I left it at that. I get a text message this afternoon. Guess what? Guess what he said? You know exactly what he said. Sorry to inconvenience you. Everything's okay. I'm going to stay up here. So, guarantee, him and the wife have sorted it out. So, it's kind of funny, isn't it? So that's why I thought, let's tell the story. And with Nicholas telling the story about, finding love on a plane, I thought that was really cute. But, I really did think that this was, this is my penguin. so to speak, because no, I met someone overseas and I had this idyllic kind of idea that, you know, love can conquer all. Anyway, it can't. Anyway, I hope you like that spilling the tea. Let's have a bit more tea. I'm home now. Is Nicholas there? I can't really see the chat. No way. Are you laughing about my ex-boyfriend living in my backyard? Well, never say never, because I'd say that even though he's got back together with his wife, I know what he's like, right? As I said, this was a serial thing that happened all the time in our relationship, sadly. And leopards don't change, right? People do change. I mean, I think I've changed as a person, um, but some people don't change. So interesting enough, hey. Anyway, I hope you like that spilling the tea. Thank you, Nicholas, for inspiring that spilling the tea today to tell the love story about how I met my Mexican boyfriend, who's not he's like my annoying brother now. But I never regret anything. In ways, it jaded me a bit. Like, I was a little bit jaded a bit. But at the same time, I moved on. I found Diego, and I'm gonna be honest, if it wasn't for breaking up with him, I would never have found Diego. And the timing of everything, right? Um, I would never have met Diego. So, and Diego, to be honest, when I say is he the love of my life, I don't know if I believe in that, but he's definitely my love for now, and you know, um, we're good together, and I think it's probably the best relationship I've ever been in. Diego is definitely the best relationship I've ever been in. He's the best guy I've ever been with, as in like, he's good for me. He's good to me. He's my favorite traveler too. As much as I love traveling by myself, he's my favorite person to travel with. He's awesome to travel with. I absolutely love traveling with him. So, you know, isn't it interesting? But, circling back to Nicholas's mum and dad meeting on a plane, it's very romantic. I mean, it's very idyllic, right? As a traveler, that's, these are the things that you think about, right? But anyway, that was my experience with, touching on, cross country dating and meeting, a holiday fling, so to speak. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. See you later. Bye. I can't actually even see the chat. Nicholas, I'm sorry, I can't see it. The light is like shining in my face, so I can't see it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I will be back tomorrow morning for a walk on the beach. And yeah, if you want to put some comments on the video when I finish, that way I can see the comments. Because I can't see the chat. The chat actually goes away for 24 hours. So I won't even be able to see what you said, Nicholas. So if you want to add something to it, put something at the end of the video when I finish the video and put it in the comments. Anyway, that was spilling the tea. I hope you enjoyed that. Marie, do you love that story? I think you'll have a few things to say about that story. And my friend Lynn, who is my angel above us, she's going to say, good grief, about him messaging me saying he wants to sleep in a tent, a swag in my backyard. And she'd be saying, hell no, don't have him anywhere near your house. Because she knew all about him and his moods and his ways. But Dora has a short memory. All she remembers now is is the happy times. I mean, I remember the bad times. To be honest, I remember the bad times. But I think it's good to remember the good times. And like I said, my time in Mexico would not have been the same without him. So I thank him for that. Bye, guys. I hope you enjoyed that spilling the tea. I enjoyed telling the story, and it's going to be very funny.